Hi friends, in this lecture we'll learn about non-ST elevated acute coronary syndromes which include unstable angina and NSTEMI. Before starting the lecture, let's discuss in brief the approach to a patient with typical cardiac chest pain. So if a patient with typical cardiac chest pain presents, the chest pain can be increased on exertion, decreased on rest and nitrates. When we do the ECG of this patient, it is normal. This patient has stable angina with cardiac markers negative. Now, when the patient complains of chest pain at rest, it is high likely to be acute coronary syndrome. When we do the ECG of these patients, it can show either ST depression or ST elevation. The ST elevated ECG is known as ST elevation MI. On the other hand, ST depression can be differentiated by cardiac biomarkers like TROP-I, TROP-T. If it is negative, it is tagged to be unstable angina. If the cardiac biomarkers are positive, then it is a case of non-ST elevation MI. If we take the cardiac biomarkers in ST elevation MI, these are strongly positive. Now briefly discussing about the pathophysiology of these different type of angina and MI is, in stable angina, the epicardial coronary arteries are narrowed due to atherosclerosis, but the blood flow is intact. Therefore, there is no cardiac myocyte injury, but this obstruction is fixed. There is fixed narrowing of the blood vessels. The demand of the myocardial oxygen will increase only if the patient is doing certain physical activity or during emotional stress. But if the narrowing or this atherosclerotic process is progressing, there is certain plaque rupture, coronary vasoconstriction or gradual intraluminal narrowing, then it can lead to acute coronary syndrome. Now in acute coronary syndrome, if there is, for example, most common cause plaque rupture. After the plaque rupture, there is thrombosis and blockage of the coronary arteries. If the blockage is incomplete and the blood is still going to the myocardial tissue, there will be no necrosis, but the pain will be increased and it will occur even at rest. This will be the case of unstable angina. On the other hand, if there is thrombosis and complete narrowing of a small coronary artery which is supplying the subendocardial region, since the coronary arteries are present from the epicardial to endocardium, there is high likely chance to the blockade of subendocardial vessels which are small in caliber. If this is the picture, then it will lead to non-ST elevation MI, which will lead to subendocardial infarct. On the other hand, if there is blockage of a large epicardial coronary artery which leads to transmural infarct, this will be the case of ST elevation MI, and there will be increase in cardiac troponins in large titers. This will be strongly positive cardiac troponin test, transmural infarct. Now coming on to the pathophysiology of NSTE-ACS, there is a imbalance between supply and demand due to thrombus formation. This thrombus formation can occur due to any one of these following reasons. There can be atherosclerotic plaque rupture, erosion, or a calcified protruding nodule in the lumen of the epicardial coronary artery. There can be coronary artery vasoconstriction or gradual intraluminal narrowing. Some hyperdynamic states like fever, tachycardia, or thyrotoxicosis, these all will lead to increased demand with a fixed epicardial coronary obstruction. This can also lead to NST ACS. Now, what is the most common cause among these? The most common cause is plaque rupture. When we do the angiography of these patients, it is important to note that around 35% patients, which is a large number, found to be have a triple vessel disease. This means all the large epicardial coronary arteries have a obstruction of certain level. On the other hand, 20% have double vessel disease, another 20% have single vessel disease, 10% patients have obstruction of left main coronary artery. This is a very big artery supplying a large part of the left ventricle. On the other hand, around 50% patients have no stenosis on angiography. Now, when we come to the history and physical examination of this patient, in NST-ACS, there is severe chest discomfort with at least one of the three features. The pain should be present at rest or with minimal exertion lasting for more than 10 minutes. The pain should be having a relatively recent onset, that is within 2 weeks, should have crescendo pattern, that is distinctly more severe, frequent and prolonged pain than the previous episodes. The physical examination of these patients is similar as we have discussed in the lecture of stable angina. If there is large myocardial ischemia or large NSTEMI, the patients can complain of diaphoresis, can have pale cool skin, sinus tachycardia, S3 and S4 sounds, basilar rales due to pulmonary edema and hypotension due to LV failure. If patient with any one of these features presents to us and the cardiac troponin test, that is cardiac biomarkers, are positive, the patient is NST elevation MI. Now coming on to the investigations, the first and foremost is ECG. ECG can show us ST segment depression, but it is important to note that it is seen only in 1/3 of the patients. Other patients can have a normal ECG. T-wave inversion is a less specific finding. But T-wave inversions are important if these are new inversion as compared to their previous ECGs, or the inversions are more than 3 mm deep. Second investigation which we usually perform are cardiac biomarkers in the form of TROP-I or TROP-T or CK-MB, which is the cardiac specific creatine kinase marker. These TROP tests are more specific and sensitive, and these CK-MB are less sensitive alternative, and these are usually not used. The cardiac markers help us differentiate between unstable angina and NSTEMI. The levels rise and peak at 12 to 24 hours after the symptom onset. And there is direct correlation between the elevation and mortality. Higher the cardiac biomarker level, poor is the prognosis of the patient. If there is no clear history or evidence of ischemia, the elevation of these biomarkers can also be seen in various other conditions. The last is stress testing. Now, what all conditions can lead to elevation of cardiac biomarkers? So there are many cardiac conditions and non-cardiac conditions other than MI which can lead to elevation of troponins. The cardiac conditions include tachyarrhythmias, congestive heart failure, hypertensive emergencies, infection, inflammation like myocarditis, pericarditis, stress cardiomyopathy, which is also known as Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, structural heart disease like aortic stenosis, aortic dissection, coronary spasm in Prinzmetal angina, cardiac procedures like CABG, infiltrative disease of heart like amyloidosis and malignancy. On the other hand, non-cardiac causes can be due to pulmonary embolism, portal hypertension, trauma, example cardioversion, hypo or hyperthyroidism, toxicity, renal failure, sepsis, shock, stroke, and other acute neurological conditions, extreme exercise, or rhabdomyolysis. So it is important to note that these biomarkers should be considered only if the patient presents with typical chest pain, which is typical cardiac chest pain with some ECG changes. Now friends, what are the goals? Why are we performing these investigations? The first and important goal is we have to exclude an MI using biomarkers like troponin. We have to exclude a non-ST elevation MI and treat its condition as soon as possible. Then we have to observe the patient and detect rest ischemia using serial or continuous ECG recording. Third, we have to detect coronary obstruction at rest with CCTA, that is coronary computed tomographic angiography, and ischemia if present with the help of stress testing. Now the treatment of these patients is divided into medical treatment and invasive treatment. In medical treatment, first we have to decrease the symptoms of the patient by giving anti-ischemic drugs. Then we have to decrease the further coronary obstruction by giving anti-thrombotic drugs. Anti-thrombotic drugs can be antiplatelets or anticoagulants. Invasive therapy will include PCI or CABG. We have already discussed this in the lecture of stable angina. First we will discuss anti-ischemic drugs, then antiplatelets, then anticoagulants. Now the treatment when the patient has been admitted to us with the chest pain, having ECG changes and elevation of cardiac biomarkers, the treatment consists of medical treatment with bed rest and continuous ECG monitoring. This ECG monitoring is important for any ST segment deviations or development of arrhythmias. All the patients should be kept on monitors. Ambulation is permitted if there are no serial ECG changes or there is no recurrence of symptoms, no elevation of cardiac biomarkers for 12 to 24 hours. The acute phase treatment involves anti-ischemic drugs and anti-thrombotic drugs, and there is long-term treatment of the patient on the OPD basis. Let's start with the anti-ischemic drugs. The first drug class which is used are nitrates. These are to be given in patients with acute coronary syndrome with chest discomfort or an anginal equivalent. When should be this drug avoided? In cases of hypotension, right ventricular infarction, severe aortic stenosis, this is very important point, and patients who are receiving PDE5 inhibitors, which are sildenafil, within 24 hours if the patient has taken this drug within 24 hours, or tadalafil, which has a greater half-life and taken within 48 hours. Now the dose is, initially we give the sublingual or buccal tablets. Up to 3 doses can be given, 5 minutes apart. If there is no response by these sublingual or oral tablets, we start IV infusion. The IV infusion is started at 5 to 10 microgram per minute, and it can be increased up to 100 microgram per minute till the relief of symptoms or there is development of limiting side effects. These limiting side effects can be headache or fall in BP less than 90 millimeter mercury. Now coming on to the second drug class, that is beta blockers. These should be given in all patients with acute coronary syndrome, but there are certain contraindications like prolonged PR interval more than 0.24 second, second degree or third degree AV block, bradycardia with less than 50 beats per minute, systolic BP less than 90. Since these drugs will decrease the contractility as well as heart rate, these are the contraindications. Patients of shock, left ventricular failure or severe reactive airway disease, as the beta blockers leads to bronchoconstriction. When we talk of the dose of metoprolol is 25 to 50 milligram by mouth every 6 hours. If needed and there is no heart failure in the patients, 5 milligram increments can be done by slow IV administration. Other drugs which should be started in these patients are ACE inhibitors or ARBs, as well as HNG coenzyme A inhibitors, which are statins. The statins are given in the dose of atorvastatin 80 milligram per day prior to PCI. This is used to decrease the LDL level. If the LDL level is not decreasing to less than 50% of the previous levels, or it is more than 70 milligram per deciliter after giving atorvastatin, we can add a drug ezetimibe 10 milligram OD for further decrease in LDL levels. The third drug class is calcium channel blockers. These are to be given if there is no relief by adequate dose of nitrates and beta blockers. First we will give nitrates, beta blockers. If there is no relief, then we will start calcium channel blockers. Or the patients are unable to tolerate these drugs or have contraindications to nitrates or beta blockers. Also, the patients of variant angina, Prinzmetal angina, these are to be given calcium channel blockers. The contraindications are pulmonary edema and evidence of LV dysfunction. LV dysfunction is a contraindication only for non-DHPs. DHPs can be given in this condition. The dose of dilzem, that is diltiazem, is 30 to 80 milligram 4 times a day, that is QID. For a immediate release tablet, for sustained release, it is 120 to 320 milligram once daily. On the other hand, the dose of verapamil is 80 to 160 milligram TDS for immediate release tablets and 120 to 480 milligram OD for sustained release. Amlodipine can be given in a dose of 5 to 10 milligram OD if the patient is especially hypertensive. Morphine can be considered in patients who have got no relief on the 3 doses of NTG or the recurrence of symptoms, but it should be avoided in patients having hypotension, respiratory depression, confusion and obtundation. The dose is 2 to 5 milligram IV and it can be repeated every 5 to 30 minutes. Now the next drug class which we will discuss are antiplatelet drugs. These have 3 types of drugs: COX inhibitors, P2Y12 inhibitors and GP2B3A inhibitors. First, COX inhibitors. The drug in this class is aspirin. It inhibits acetylation of COX. Which prevents the conversion of arachidonic acid to thromboxane A2, therefore inhibiting platelet adhesion and activation. Now, aspirin is given in the loading dose of 325 milligram non-enteric formulation. This should be non-enteric formulation. This is the loading dose of aspirin. Thereafter, 75 milligram per day enteric or non-enteric tablet can be given per day indefinitely. The contraindications are if the patient has severe active bleeding or allergy to aspirin. Now, in the absence of risk of bleeding, patients who are presenting with NST-ACS should also receive P2Y12 inhibitors, whether these are treated by conservative strategy or invasive strategy. Now let's discuss this P2Y12 inhibitors. The P2Y12 is a ADP receptor on platelets which leads to activation of GP2B3A, which helps in platelet activation and aggregation. And this GP2B3A is a receptor for fibrinogen and von Willebrand factor. The P2Y12 inhibitors therefore inhibits platelet activation. There are 4 drugs in this P2Y12 inhibitors. The clopidogrel is a prodrug which leads to irreversible blockade of this receptor. The loading dose is 300 to 600 milligram and the maintenance is 75 milligram daily. When we add clopidogrel to aspirin, there is 20% risk reduction of cardiovascular death, MI or stroke compared to aspirin alone. But there is slight increase bleeding risk which is only 1% increased. This combination of aspirin along with clopidogrel is dual antiplatelet therapy, and this dual antiplatelet therapy should continue for at least 1 year in patients of NSTEMI, especially those who are having drug-eluting stents. After 1 year, only aspirin should be continued indefinitely. Now, alternative P2Y12 inhibitors, which are prasugrel, ticagrelor, or cangrelor, these can be used in patients of NST-ACS who develop coronary event while receiving clopidogrel along with aspirin, or the patients who are hyporesponsive to clopidogrel, or these are having high risk for ischemic complications. The prasugrel is a thienopyridine derivative. It has a rapid and higher level platelet inactivation. It is mostly used as an adjunct to PCI, that is percutaneous coronary interventions. Loading dose is 60 milligram. Then the maintenance is 10 milligram daily. The contraindications are prior stroke, TIA, or high risk of bleeding. The ticagrelor is a reversible. It is very important point. As the clopidogrel was irreversible blockade, the ticagrelor gives reversible P2Y12 blockade. It is better than clopidogrel with a loading dose of 180 milligram and a maintenance of 90 milligram BD. Now we have one IV drug which is cangrelor. It is a IV direct rapid acting P2Y12 inhibitor which is given in a bolus of 30 microgram per kg followed by 4 microgram per kg per minute infusion. It is also used adjunct to PCI. Now coming on to GP2B3A inhibitors in antiplatelet drugs. GP2B3A is a receptor for fibrinogen and von Willebrand factor which aids in platelet activation. The addition of these drugs to dual antiplatelet therapy makes it triple antiplatelet therapy, that is TAPT. These are reserved only for unstable patients who are having recurrent chest pain, elevated trop levels, ECG changes, coronary thrombus on angiography. These should be reserved only for these patients with these features who are undergoing PCI. All these drugs are intravenous drugs. Example are abciximab, eptifibatide or tirofiban. The dose of tirofiban is 25 microgram per kg per minute loading dose followed by 0.15 microgram per kg per minute for 2 to 4 days. On the other hand, abciximab is used for up to 1 day. Now after we have discussed anti-ischemic drugs, antiplatelet drugs, the third drug class which we will discuss is anticoagulants. We have 4 options which are unfractionated heparin, low molecular weight heparin, bevalirudin and fondaparinux. The unfractionated heparin is used from decades. It is given in bolus of 70 to 100 units per kg, maximum 5000 units. It is followed by an infusion of 12 to 15 units per kg per hour. The low molecular weight heparin, which is enoxaparin, it is superior to unfractionated heparin, but there is slight increased risk of bleeding as compared to unfractionated heparin. It is first given IV with a bolus 30 milligram. Then it is started subcutaneously in BD dose of 1 milligram per kg BD. Renal adjustment is to be done if the creatinine clearance is less than 30 ml per minute. In these cases, the dose is adjusted to 1 milligram per kg OD. The normal dose was 1 milligram per kg BD. The third drug is bevalirudin. It is given in IV bolus of 0.75 milligram per kg, followed by an infusion of 1.75 milligram per kg per hour. It is important that the bivalirudin has less risk of bleeding as compared to LMWH. The newer drug fondaparinux is given subcutaneously in dose of 2.5 milligram OD. It is equivalent to enoxaparin in the efficacy but has a lower risk of bleeding. Now let's discuss that how to select invasive versus conservative strategy in the management of NST-ACS. In invasive strategy, there is initiation of medical treatment in the form of anti-ischemics and antithrombotic drugs. Antithrombotics include antiplatelet and anticoagulants. After this, coronary angiography is performed within 48 hours of presentation, which is followed by revascularization, which can be PCI or CABG. This is usually done for high risk patients who have multiple risk factors or ST segment deviations and positive biomarkers. Now this invasive strategy, based on the time duration, how soon it is started, it can be divided into immediate invasive, early invasive or delayed invasive. Immediate invasive is done within 2 hours of presentation. Early invasive is done within 24 hours of presentation, and the delayed invasive strategy is performed 24 to 72 hours of presentation. Now coming on to the conservative strategy, in these patients we start initiation of medical treatment in the form of anti-ischemics and antithrombotics. Then these are monitored closely with the help of serial ECGs or continuous ECG monitoring. Arteriography is only performed if there is rest pain, ST changes, or the biomarkers become positive. Now, after the patient has been discharged after the hospitalization, what is the long-term management of this patient? Risk factor modification should be done. There should be smoking cessation if present, optimum weight of the patient, daily exercise, BP control, appropriate diet for the patient, and there should be control of hyperglycemia. Beta blockers should be used in every patient for long-term management if there is no contraindication. Statins in the high dose, that is atorvastatin, 80 milligram per day should be used. And if it is not able to decrease the LDL levels by 50%, 70 milligram per deciliter, we will add ezetimibe in the dose of 10 milligram per day. ACE inhibitors or ARB should be used if the patient has multiple risk factors like obesity, diabetes, hypertension. Antiplatelets are to be used. Aspirin should be used low dose 75 milligram to 100 milligram OD indefinitely. And the clopidogrel, which is a P2 Y12 inhibitor, it should be used in a dose of 75 milligram per day at least for 1 year. It can be extended to 3 years, but most guidelines say 1 year. Now let's come to the final part of this presentation, that is Prinzmetal variant angina. In this, patients complain of severe ischemic pain at rest. These will show transient ST elevation at the time of pain. This is due to focal spasm of epicardial coronary artery, which results in transmural transient ischemia and abnormalities of LV function. It is dangerous because it can lead to acute MI, VT, VF and sudden cardiac death. The mechanism of Prinzmetal's angina is hypercontractility of vascular smooth muscles in response to adrenaline, vasoconstrictors, leukotrienes or serotonin. The clinical features include generally a young patient who is a cigarette smoker, usually without any other risk factors, no other risk factors present with this condition. The patient should also be searched for other vascular conditions like migraine or Raynaud's phenomena because it is more common in these conditions. ECG shows transient ST elevation, transient ST elevation with rest pain. On angiography, again we see transient coronary spasm. This coronary spasm can be provoked during angiography with the help of hyperventilation when the patient is hyperventilated, or by the intracoronary use of acetylcholine. The treatment is dependent on nitrates and calcium channel blockers, statins, and coronary revascularization should be done if any lesion is found intraoperatively. It is important that aspirin is avoided in these patients because the symptoms can increase, because there is sensitivity of coronary tone to changes in prostacyclin levels. Therefore, aspirin is strictly avoided in these patients. The 5-year survival rate is excellent, and there is 90 to 95% 5-year survival rate. Now let's discuss the treatment summary of the patients of NST ACS according to the 2014 American Heart Association. The initial treatment should begin with dual antiplatelet therapy and anticoagulant therapy in the form of aspirin, P2Y12 inhibitor, clopidogrel or ticagrelor, anticoagulant which is enoxaparin or fondaparinux or bevalirudin. We can consider GP2B3A inhibitors like tirofiban to early invasive strategy in high risk patients. During hospitalization, if the patient is treated only medically, this same treatment will continue. Even if the patient, if it is treated invasively by PCI, the same treatment will be considered. In PCI patients, additionally GP2B3A inhibitors are considered. What is the long-term treatment? The medical treated patients will receive aspirin indefinitely and P2Y12 inhibitor, that is clopidogrel, for up to 12 months. Same is with the PCI treated patients. Other anti-ischemic drugs are to be added along with these drugs. Thank you so much guys. Kindly subscribe to the channel and like this video for more such content.